going to hop right into it then. For everyone who's watching or who comes on later, I just want to say now, thank you so much for tuning in to Ask an Activist. Usually, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, we do a Ask a Scientist on select Fridays in the fall. But I thought, there's some amazing work going on outside of the strictly scientific realm. A lot of work being done with youth and just activism and education and community that I really wanted to highlight. And yeah, so today I have my guests, Ashia and Phoenix, here with me. My name is Diana Fu. I'm with the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, and then I will invite both of my guests to introduce themselves and talk about their organization. So basically, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, we manage or help manage collaboratively the largest estuary on the West Coast, the San Francisco Estuary. And that basically means the San Francisco Bay Area and also the Sacramento and the San Joaquin Delta. It's all one interconnected system, and we work in partnership with federal, local, state governments, as well as, community groups, nonprofits, one of which I have here today. So Ashia, Phoenix, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashia. I use they, them pronouns. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, which is unceded territory of Comanche, Arapaho, and Cheyenne peoples. Currently based here in Eugene, Oregon, on Kalapuya land. And I am an environmental justice educator and coordinator with Mycelium Youth Network.
I'm Phoenix Armenta. I'm here in Oakland, California on unceded Chochenyo Ohlone land. I am also an educator, environmental justice expert, and with the Mycelium Youth Network. I also work with the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for those lovely introductions. And yes, I completely forgot. I'm also on unceded Ohlone Chochenyo land. I'm also calling from, I guess, also known as Alameda Island. So I would love to hear more about Mycelium Youth Network. I think there's been a lot of things happening in the press and the news, but I really want to hear it from you two. What does Mycelium Youth Network do?
Well, we teach climate resilience education to young people, really based in STEAM education and indigenous ancestral practices. So we're really looking at how can we train our young people to be prepared for some of the issues that are going to be coming with the coming climate crisis.
Mm-hmm. As part of our programming, we also have Dungeons and Dragons. We believe that fantasy and gaming is like a really useful tool, but also kind of like escape in thinking about, like climate issues. A lot of the D&D games are environmental or climate themed. So while they are educational, they're also a space for youth to activate their imagination. And then we also do some partnering with some other organizations and schools around climate resilience education. Currently, we're working actually with Nuestra Casa EJ Academy. They have an adult sort of workshop that they run in the evenings, and then I'm helping out with the youth side of things. So a lot of our curriculum is based on environmental justice and climate justice, and holding space for youth who are definitely going to be most impacted by coming climate issues and current climate issues.
Mm-hmm. I should also add that we are establishing youth leadership councils at various high schools around the Bay Area to get young people out in the community talking to their community about what is it that we need to do in order to prepare for climate change and to help implement that on a large scale.
Awesome. Wow, that's a lot of work going on, and really happy to hear that different community-based organizations are working together to provide these resources to youth all across the Bay Area, and hopefully not just, in our little tiny region, but also, across this continent. I wanted to talk a little bit about this upcoming conference that you have going on. Phoenix or Ashia, do you want to talk a little bit about apocalyptic resilience and what it is?
Well, it's a gaming conference that is sort of kind of like a small look into our programming and to some of the things that we offer. So there are going to be workshops that will deal with different issues around climate resilience, how to prepare for climate change. We're having our keynote speaker is Fabiana Rodriguez. And then it all culminates in a D&D game at the end of the conference. So as you're taking the workshops, you actually build up your skills that you can later use in the D&D game. Ashia, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so our theme this year is borrowed from Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents. Right, this year it's Apocalyptic Resilience, Parable of the Survivors. So we're using a lot of themes from that text, but also imagining what a climate resilient future would look like that is rooted in Afro-Indigeneity, that's rooted in traditional ecological knowledge, applying these skills and really building up a space for youth and adults alike to do that freedom dreaming around like what would a bold climate resilient and climate adaptive future look like for us, reclaiming some of that power and building that network and building that community, not only through the workshops, but also through the game, which is going to be very much like Parable of the Sour themed.
Cool. I wanted to back up a little bit because I heard you use some terms that everyone may not be familiar with. I heard TEK. I believe that means traditional ecological knowledge, but I don't know if you would like to break that down a little bit for the people who are watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for signaling that. So when I say traditional ecological knowledge, I'm speaking more kind of like largely around an Afro-Indigenous system, but also just kind of like, I guess, like a wider sort of understanding that there are certain place-based knowledges, that there are certain like learned and experiential knowledges around our ecologies, our various environments and infrastructures that have been learned and passed down through ancestral, like passed down through generations of like ancestral knowledge that is very much like plant and animal focused. That's very much like connected and rooted in indigenous practices, not just in the Americas, but globally.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like traditional ecological knowledge is something that is not just like scientific in the way that we typically think of like scientific being like very Western and very white and patriarchal. Sounds like traditional ecological knowledge is a lot of different things all at once. Like it's customs, it's practice, it's culture. And it's also like in many ways like scientific, right? In the way that we might think of things that are traditionally scientific. That's really cool. I actually don't know if everyone is super familiar with like D&D or Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't know if both of you are super familiar with D&D and want to talk about it and like why you chose to use like Dungeons and Dragons as this kind of like platform to teach about climate resilience.
Yeah, Phoenix, you want to take this one?
Lil is way into Dungeons and Dragons, and so she got us all into it, and all up to the point where we can become dungeon masters. It's this really amazing game where, you know, you start out with the scenario and you have a dungeon master who kind of leads the scenario, and then the players go around and they get to act out how they would behave in that scenario. And then there's a dice system where you roll a die, and depending on what number you get, then that dictates like what happens in reaction to however you're behaving. And so it allows you to like role play. It's like this collective imagining of this world together, and role play a lot of different scenarios with it. And it's really good when you're dealing with ecological disasters because you can just kind of role play like how you would respond to, you know, different issues.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing to note, especially about Dungeons and Dragons, is that historically it's been very white. And I think even the realm of fantasy has been very Western and very white. And us using D&D, we're trying to kind of recenter, again, like Afro-Indigenous folks, other folks of color that have been historically left out of the fantasy realm. I think that reclamation aspect of it is super important. When we're doing like these D&D games, almost every single character is a person of color to some extent. We try to like have marginalized backgrounds and backstories to these characters so that youth can also see themselves represented in this gaming format too.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had no idea what Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know why I thought it was like a card game, so I was like very confused when I first heard about it. But that makes a lot more sense. And I love this whole idea of like tying in like fantasy. And that kind of brings me to like my next question is like, it sounds like imagination and fantasy has a really big role to play in this conference, Apocalyptic Resilience. And I would love to hear about like both of your philosophies when it comes to just like imagination and like the power of that and the power of fantasy when we're, you know, seemingly at the edge of this precipice where something, you know, big and overwhelmingly negative could happen to us, right? Like, I would love to hear more about that.
I can say like I think that I believe in magic and magic being like you visualize the world and then you call it into existence, and like right now a lot of collective consciousness is kind of focused in on the end of the world, and we want to shift that. We want to have people's imaginations being able to focus on like what is the world that we create out of this? How do we pivot out of this problem so that we create something even more beautiful than what we have right now? And so it's like it's really important that we have, especially amongst our young people, you know, who are feeling very, you know, disengaged and disempowered in this, that they're able to collectively imagine a better world and a solution out of this crisis.
Absolutely. There's this like this really good Bell Hooks quote that I'm gonna paraphrase, but like it's like hope is essential to any political struggle for radical change when the current social climate is promotes disillusionment and despair. And so when we see that the state and our government and a lot of forces are compelling us to fall into that despair, it's really powerful to have that imagination and to be able to really like pause and think instead of, I guess, wallowing, you know, in that despair and in that disillusionment, to think, well, what if the end of the world as we know it like isn't a negative thing? What if like the end of the world is signaling something that's like that we can grow, that's bolder and better and sweeter, that will hold all of our different identities, that will hold all of our different needs. What if that is like what that signaling is, instead of like this very dystopian, you know, like apocalyptic scenario that I think is promoted a lot of the times.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask a little bit just like about like logistics of the conference. I want to know, you know, who you both want to see there. Is it youth? Is it adults? Is it certain populations? Is it, I don't know, Spanish speakers? Like who do you want to be there?
I think what's really cool this year about and also last year, I mean, like COVID took so much from us, but I mean, it also opened up a realm of like virtual connection that I think really is like unprecedented. And so usually Apocalyptic Resilience, the conference, is mostly in person or like a hybrid kind of format. And it completely went online last year. But I think that opened up a realm of connection. I mean, because when it was in person, it was like, you know, in Oakland. And now people are able to tune in really from wherever if they want to. And so I think that like with having that virtual format, it's great to see youth there. It's great to see other adults there. And I would encourage people, like, even if they are not from the Bay or in the Bay, even really in the state of California, to kind of like take advantage of this opportunity for connection. Because it's not just, I don't think it's just like, you know, like about like, skill building, even though that's a huge aspect of it, but it's also, you know, connecting with other folks of color, other marginalized folks who are really passionate about climate issues, who are doing this freedom dreaming, who are doing the work on the ground. And so it's like a really wonderful opportunity, not only for marginalized folks, but also for people who consider themselves allies or advocates to tune in and to really support an organization that's doing that on the ground climate education and climate resilience work.
Yeah, I think Ashia summed that up perfectly.
Well, you were saying, you know, showing up as support, but are there any other ways that people can support if they can't make the conference, or anything that, you know, agencies like, you know, San Francisco Estuary Partnership or the State Coastal Conservancy, I'm just calling out random department names now, Department of Water Resources, I don't know. Us agencies, I feel like, can be so far behind when it comes to knowing what's happening on the ground. But I think the sentiment is moving that we want to help, and we want to support all of this hard work that's happening on the ground. So please, like, tell us, how can we help?
Well, sponsorship of the conference is always nice. Like, we're looking for folks to sponsor the young people. We allow the young people to come in for free, and so we rely on sponsorships to help help with that cost, and then also just getting the word out. Like, this is really great. Like, we want to get as many people, get it out to as many people as possible.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's everything. I mean, like, the sponsorship deck, I think, can be very powerful. There are different levels of engagement. And I mean, even beyond like apocalyptic resilience, just sharing our work, sharing our programming. I'm sorry if y'all heard that crash. That was my cat.
It's my cat's sitting here yelling at me, and I'm trying to pet her on the side over here so she doesn't yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you're distracted, they're like, pay attention to me. But yeah, just like keeping up with what we do. We have like we're trying to build like a very strong social media presence, because some of our programming is online, and also like COVID impacts, and just like making sure that as many people are aware of what we do as possible.
Awesome. And the last question I have for you both, audience, feel free to throw questions in the chat box here, but also no pressure. It's a Friday afternoon, and I understand we all want to chill. Last question is, what do you want people to take away from the conference? And maybe even larger from any interaction with Mycelium Youth Network?
I want to just echo what Ashia had said earlier. It's that hope for the future, the idea that this doesn't have to be like a horrible end. It could be the beginning of something new and wonderful and beautiful. We can transform our society in such a way that what comes next is even more glorious than anything we've ever imagined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think especially for youth, for them to feel empowered, for them to be armed with knowledge and resources, I think having like the very like specific programming that we do, which is so focused on skill building, and is so like applicable, and not like, I just say this as someone who like has spent the past however many years in academia, like more in practice than theory, and just like showing that there is something to be won, and something to contribute to, and not even that, just like even like beyond that, just like our name is like Mycelium Youth Network because we're trying to formulate those connections, we're trying to formulate those networks, and for youth and adults alike to know that there are other people doing the work, other people invested and engaged in these issues, and you have a team, and you have support and a collective behind you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm going to start wrapping it up here unless anyone in the audience has questions. I just wanted to shout out again Apocalyptic Resilience 2, Parable of the Survivors. The tickets are on sale. It is going to be the weekend of November 6th through 7th from 10:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific time. So for any folks who are listening in, who love Dungeons and Dragons, who know of youth who love Dungeons and Dragons, please spread the word. This is going to be an amazing, amazing conference. And I'm sure, so much of us have just so much to gain and so much to learn from young people and just all the work that Mycelium Youth Network is doing. So with that, I'm just going to do my classic plug for our social media for the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at SF Estuary. On Facebook, you can just search up our name, San Francisco Estuary Partnership. And of course, if you're on Instagram, you're watching us at SF Estuary Partnership. And then Mycelium Youth Network. Would you like to shout out anything before we log off?
Follow us on the socials, at Mycelium Youth Network, on Twitter and Instagram. Check out our website, myceliumyouthnetwork.org, and then also, is it .com or .org? It's .org. Yeah. .org, yeah. .org, information I should know. .org. And just check out our website and see, especially if you're an educator, if you're a teacher, see if you're interested potentially in bringing Mycelium to your classroom.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you so much, you two. This has been lovely. I hope you both have a very fun and safe Halloween weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.